My name is Diane. I'm 58 years. When I saw $42,000 vanish from my account, I thought it was a bank glitch. But it wasn't. It was my own mother. She forged my name and called it a borrow. I didn't yell. I went back to the bank and made sure the next time she tried, they'd be the ones to stop her. Old, and I never thought I'd have to protect my own bank account from my own mother. That's a sentence I never imagined I'd say. I've worked my whole adult life to make sure my family was cared for, especially my mother, Elaine. I've always believed that taking care of the people who raised you is a kind of repayment for all the years they took care of you. But as I'd soon learn, not every mother sees it that way. I've been a registered nurse for over 30 years. I'm not rich, but I've always lived modestly, saved diligently, and avoided unnecessary debt. My house is small but cozy, and every penny in my account represents years of double shifts, missed holidays, and calloused hands. I was finally getting close to retirement, about 5 years away, and for once, I was starting to breathe a little easier. I had a little over $60,000 tucked away in my savings. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. My mother, Elaine, is 78 now. She's always been complicated. Growing up, I watched her juggle charm and manipulation like a professional. When I was younger, she could convince anyone of anything, whether it was returning a used dress for cash or sweet-talking a mechanic into free repairs. As an adult, I brushed it off as her old-school way of surviving. But deep down, I knew there was a darker edge to it. Still, I helped her whenever I could. Groceries, medication, new hearing aids, you name it. I even helped her pay off a credit card last year. She would always say, "You're my good girl, Diane. You always take care of your mama." I guess I believed it meant something back then. That belief started to crack the morning I opened my bank app. I was sipping coffee, half listening to the morning news, when I noticed something off. My balance seemed lower than usual. I blinked, refreshed the page, and felt my stomach drop. A $42,000 withdrawal, just gone. One line, one transaction, dated 3 days earlier. At first I thought it had to be a bank error. There was no way that much money could disappear without my approval. I went cold all over, my pulse racing as I stared at the screen. I grabbed my keys, didn't even finish my coffee, and drove straight to my local branch. I remember my hands shaking as I waited in line, trying to think of any logical explanation. Maybe the bank was hacked. Maybe it was a system glitch. Maybe anything but what it really was. When I reached the teller's desk, I handed over my ID and blurted, "There's a mistake on my account. $42,000 was withdrawn, and I didn't authorize it." The young teller clicked through her screen, frowning slightly. "Let me pull up your account details, ma'am." A few moments later, she looked up. "It says here the withdrawal was made in person, at our Eastwood branch." "In person?" I repeated. "That's impossible. I haven't been to Eastwood in months." She hesitated before saying, "According to the record, the person who made the withdrawal was listed as authorized on the account." I froze. "Authorized? There's no one authorized on my account. It's just me." She looked unsure, then called over a manager. After a quiet conversation between them, the manager, a woman named Sandra, led me to her office and printed out the withdrawal slip. She slid it across the desk. "This is the signature on file from the transaction." I stared at it. My heart thudded painfully in my chest. The handwriting was familiar, eerily familiar. The loops, the slant, the way the E curved just so. It couldn't be, but it was. My mother's signature. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. My mouth went dry, and I felt something inside me twist and tighten. How could this happen?" I finally whispered. Sandra sighed gently. "It's possible someone presented themselves as an authorized user. Do you know an Elaine Brooks?" I felt the world tilt. "That's my mother." The bank staff explained that according to their records, someone by that name was added as an authorized signer years ago, apparently when the account was opened. That didn't make sense. I opened that account alone, fresh out of my divorce. No one else had been there. No one but me. I left the bank in a fog, clutching the paperwork in my hand, heart pounding in my ears. Once I got home, I sat at the kitchen table and called my mother. She answered cheerfully, "Hi, honey, everything okay?" "Mom," I said slowly. Did you take money from my savings account? There was a brief pause. Then she laughed. Oh, that. Don't sound so dramatic, sweetheart. I just borrowed it. I'll pay you back soon. Borrowed. $42,000. Like it was a cup of sugar. Mom, that's my retirement money, I said, my voice trembling. Oh, Diane, she sighed. You've always been so uptight about money. I needed it for something important. You'll be fine. You always are. Something inside me broke. All those years of helping her, of giving without question, and this was how she repaid me, by stealing from me, smiling while she did it. That night, I sat in the dark, staring at my bank app, wondering if blood really was thicker than money. The next morning, I drove to my mother's house before the sun was fully up. I hadn't slept more than an hour, my mind looping through every possible reason, every half-baked justification she might give. Maybe she'd been scammed. Maybe someone pressured her. Anything but what it looked like. Theft. But when I knocked on her door and saw her expression, calm, almost smug, I knew there would be no apology waiting for me. Elaine opened the door in her robe, hair pinned back, coffee mug in hand, as if it were any other day. You're up early, she said with that airy tone she always used when she was about to deflect something. Yeah, I said quietly, stepping inside. We need to talk. Now. She set her mug down and sighed, like I was already exhausting her. This about the money? The $42,000. Yes, I said, voice cracking. Why would you do that? That's my life savings, Mom. That's my retirement. She tilted her head, her tone turning syrupy. Oh, honey, don't make it sound so dramatic. I didn't take it. I just borrowed it. Borrowed it for what? I did. Why would you even think that was okay? She hesitated, then said, It was for your sister. Kimberly's been going through a hard time. She had some debts, and... Kimberly? I interrupted, barely believing what I was hearing. You took my money for her? She's been struggling, Elaine said defensively. She made some mistakes. I couldn't just stand by and watch her sink. My stomach twisted. Kimberly, the golden child, the one who always got bailed out, the one Mom never let face consequences. You could have asked me, I said, trying to steady my breathing. You could have told me what was going on. Elaine crossed her arms. I knew you'd say no. You've always been so strict about money. You have a good job, Diane. You're comfortable. Your sister doesn't have what you do. There it was. That familiar refrain. The same song I'd heard my entire life. Kimberly needed help. Kimberly was fragile. Kimberly deserved one more chance. I could almost hear echoes of my childhood. Kimberly getting the new bicycle while I got the hand-me-down. Kimberly's college fund paid for while I worked nights to afford nursing school. I used to think maybe I was just the strong one, the dependable one. But standing there in that kitchen, watching my mother justify stealing from me, I realized it wasn't about strength. It was about favoritism, plain and simple. Do you have any idea what you've done? I whispered. That was my future, my security. Elaine rolled her eyes. Oh, stop being melodramatic. You'll get it back. Kimberly will pay me back, and I'll pay you. We're family. It's not like I stole from a stranger. The words hit like a slap. That's exactly what you did, I said quietly. She turned away, clearly done with the conversation. You should be grateful I didn't tell you sooner. You'd have just made it worse with your temper. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but I just stood there, feeling the weight of years pressing down on me. Every sacrifice, every time I'd put her first. My throat tightened, and all I could manage was, I can't believe you'd do this to me. Don't be so self-righteous, she snapped suddenly, her tone sharp now. You've always thought you're better than your sister because you have a degree and a pension. Maybe it's time you helped her for once without judging her. That was it. That was the excuse that broke me. She wasn't sorry, not even close. I left without another word, my hands trembling as I got back into my car. I drove aimlessly for a while, tears blurring my vision. I wasn't just hurt, I was hollow. Betrayal from a parent isn't like any other kind. It cuts through something primal, something sacred. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed with a message. It was from Kimberly. Mom told me about what happened. Please don't make a big deal out of this. I'll pay her back soon. I stared at the text in disbelief. Not an apology, not even an ounce of accountability. Just another expectation that I'd clean up their mess quietly, like always. I sat on my porch, reading that message over and over. They both thought I'd just let it go, that I'd forgive them because that's what I always did. But something was different this time. Something inside me, something that had been patient and understanding for 58 years, finally snapped. The next day at work, I told Ruth, my closest friend and coworker, everything. We were sitting in the break room, and I could barely keep my composure as I recounted it all. The withdrawal, the signature, the lies. Ruth shook her head slowly. Diane, that's not borrowing. That's stealing. And family or not, you have every right to be furious. I just can't believe she'd go this far, I whispered. I've helped her for years. I thought we had trust. Ruth leaned forward. Sweetheart, being family doesn't mean being a doormat. You can love your mother and still set boundaries. You have to. Her words stayed with me the rest of the day. For the first time, I realized I didn't have to be the good daughter anymore. I didn't have to keep absorbing their selfishness just to keep the peace. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, looking at the printed withdrawal slip from the bank. My mother's forged signature glared up at me like a scar on paper. I took a deep breath and made a decision. If they wanted to treat me like a fool, I'd let the bank do the talking next. After a few restless nights replaying everything in my mind, I decided I couldn't just sit and stew in anger. I needed answers. I needed to understand how my mother even had access to my savings in the first place. I'd opened that account years ago, right after my divorce, and I'd been the only name attached to it since day one, or at least I thought I was. So, on a gray Thursday morning, I called the bank and requested a meeting with the branch manager, Sandra, the woman who'd helped me when I first discovered the withdrawal. Her tone on the phone was calm and reassuring, and she scheduled me for the next day. When I arrived, Sandra greeted me with that professional warmth that bankers are trained to have. But there was genuine empathy in her eyes. She led me into her office, closed the door, and motioned for me to sit. Diane, I looked into your account records after you left the other day, she began. There are some things we need to go over carefully. My stomach nodded. I appreciate that, Sandra. I can't understand how my mother's name could even show up on anything. She nodded and turned her monitor toward me. According to our system, your mother, Elaine Brooks, is listed as a co-signer on your savings account. That designation would allow her to withdraw or deposit funds freely. I blinked at the screen. Sure, I'd misheard her. Co-signer? No. No, that's impossible. I've never added anyone. Not her, not anyone. Sandra gave me a sympathetic look. That's what I figured you'd say. So I pulled the physical authorization forms from the archives. She slid a folder across the desk. This is from the date your account was opened, 15 years ago. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the pages, and there it was, a signature under mine. Elaine Brooks, her neat looping handwriting, the one she used for signing Christmas cards and grocery checks. For a second, I couldn't breathe. That's her, I whispered. But she wasn't even there when I opened this account. I remember I was alone. Sandra nodded. I thought so. I checked the timestamps, and the form seems to have been added several weeks after your initial account opening. That's a red flag. The realization hit me like a wave. She forged it, I said quietly. She actually forged her name onto my account. Sandra didn't say it outright, but her eyes told me she agreed. Unfortunately, Diane, even within families, this kind of thing does happen. I know it's hard to hear, but what you're describing qualifies as fraud. Fraud. The word sounded too harsh, too criminal to apply to my mother. Yet there it was, hanging in the air between us. I don't know if I can do that, I murmured. She's 78. My mother, for God's sake. I understand, Sandra said softly. You don't have to press charges, but you can take steps to protect yourself. We can put safeguards in place immediately to ensure no one accesses your funds again without your explicit permission. I sat there, numb, as she began typing notes into her computer. The withdrawal, I asked quietly, was made at the Eastwood branch, right? Yes, she confirmed. And interestingly, Mrs. Brooks is a regular customer there. The staff know her by name. It made sense now. She must have walked in confidently, probably charming the teller the way she always did, claiming she was helping me handle some financial matters. I could practically hear her voice. Oh, Diane asked me to take care of it. You know how forgetful she gets. Sandra continued. Given what's happened, I strongly suggest we add verification protocols to your account, something stricter than a simple signature. What kind of protocols? I asked, leaning forward. We can require government-issued ID for any transaction over a certain amount, and, she added, we can flag your account internally so that no one other than you, with matching photo ID, can initiate withdrawals or changes. Even if someone claims to be acting on your behalf, staff will be required to verify identity on record first. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Control. Do it, I said firmly. Flag everything. I don't care if it makes things complicated. I don't want anyone, not even my mother, to touch that account again. Sandra nodded and started entering notes into the system. I'll also document this meeting and keep copies of the authorization form in your file. If this ever escalates or you decide to pursue it legally, you'll have the evidence you need. The word evidence sent a chill through me. I wasn't ready to think of my mother as someone I might have to protect myself from legally, but at the same time, I couldn't deny that's exactly what this was becoming. As I stood to leave, Sandra offered a kind smile. You did the right thing coming in. People don't like to think of family members as capable of this, but protecting yourself doesn't make you cold, Diane. It makes you smart. I nodded, gripping the folder against my chest as I walked out. Outside, the air felt sharp and heavy. My mind was a storm, anger, guilt, sadness, and disbelief all crashing together. Back in my car, I opened the folder again, staring at the forged signature under my own. The handwriting looked so neat, so deliberate. It was like she'd signed not just her name, but her ownership over me, as if all the years of control and guilt weren't enough. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a daughter. I felt like a victim. But I wasn't going to stay one. If Mom wanted to touch my money again, she'd have to prove she was me. And I'd make sure the bank asked. It was only a few days after my meeting with Sandra when the phone rang at work. I recognized the number immediately. The bank. My stomach dropped. For a split second, I thought maybe something else had gone wrong. But when I answered, Sandra's calm, measured voice told me this was something entirely different. Diane, she began, I wanted to update you about an incident that occurred this morning at our Eastwood branch. The tone in her voice told me everything before she even said it. Was it my mother? I asked quietly. Yes, she replied. Elaine Brooks came in around 10 a.m. She attempted to make another withdrawal from your savings account, a substantial amount. I felt my heart pound in my chest. And? Sandra took a breath, her professionalism tinged with something like restrained satisfaction. Our teller followed the new verification policy you authorized. She asked Mrs. Brooks to present her photo ID, as required for all account holders. I could almost picture it. My mother standing there, smiling that confident, practiced smile she used whenever she wanted something. And what did she do? Sandra hesitated for a moment, then said, She tried insisting that she's your mother, and that she's always handled her daughter's accounts. She told the teller that she didn't need to show identification, that it was unnecessary since everyone knows her here. That sounded exactly like her. My mother's confidence was her weapon. She wielded it like armor. For 78 years, charm and audacity had gotten her whatever she wanted. But not this time. Sandra continued. The teller remained calm but firm. She explained that without matching ID, she couldn't proceed with any transactions. Your mother became quite upset. How upset? I asked, bracing myself. Sandra exhaled. She raised her voice, claimed the bank was stealing her money. She accused the teller of discrimination and demanded to see the manager. Security had to be called when she started shouting in the lobby. My jaw dropped. Oh my God. She even threatened to call the police, Sandra added. I came down myself to handle it. I tried to speak with her calmly, but she refused to listen. She said, and I quote, My daughter wouldn't dare block me from her accounts. I've managed her money since she was a teenager. That line made my blood boil. It was a lie, but more than that, it was the perfect snapshot of her mindset. She really did believe she owned me, even at 58 years old. What happened next? I asked. I explained the account policy changes, that all transactions now require government-issued identification for every authorized party, Sandra said. When I told her her ID didn't match the one on file, she lost her temper completely. Security escorted her out of the building after multiple requests for her to calm down. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or collapse. For the first time, someone had told my mother no, and she couldn't handle it. Sandra's tone softened. I just wanted to let you know that your account remains secure. We filed a report on the incident internally, and I've made a note that Mrs. Brooks should not be permitted access under any circumstances without your written approval. Thank you, I said quietly, my throat tight. Thank you for protecting me from her. Sandra paused. I can tell this is difficult for you. I've seen a lot of cases like this, Diane. It's never easy when it's family, but you did the right thing. You set boundaries. And that's something most people don't have the courage to do. When I hung up, I just sat there for a long time, my phone still in my hand. My coworkers were chatting nearby, oblivious to the emotional earthquake I'd just experienced. It was a strange mixture of relief and heartbreak, like winning a battle I never wanted to fight. A few hours later, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't the bank. It was her. Mom, I answered cautiously. Her voice came sharp and cold. How dare you embarrass me like that? I closed my eyes, took a breath. You embarrassed yourself, Mom. You tried to steal from me again. Steal? She spat. You think I'm a thief? After everything I've done for you? You forged your name on my account. You took my money. What else would you call it? I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She scoffed. I borrowed it, Diane, and now you've turned everyone against me. The bank staff were whispering. People were staring. You made me look like a criminal. Mom, you did that all by yourself, I said quietly. You crossed a line. I'm not your little girl anymore, and you don't get to touch my life, or my money, without my permission. There was silence on the other end for a long moment. Then she hissed, You've always been ungrateful. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? Making me look like a fool in public? Something in her voice had shifted. Not hurt, not shame, but fury. It sent a chill down my spine. I'm protecting myself, I said. You should have thought about that before forging my signature. Don't you dare lecture me, she snapped. You're going to regret humiliating me, Diane. Just wait. And then, click. The line went dead. I sat there staring at the phone, my hands trembling slightly. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was war. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the dark. I thought of my mother's rage, her voice filled with venom, and something told me this wasn't over. I thought that would be the end of it, but Mom wasn't done trying to take what was mine. The morning after my mother's outburst at the bank, I woke up to a barrage of missed calls and messages. Most were from numbers I didn't recognize, but one, at the very top, made my stomach tighten. Kimberly, my younger sister. I hesitated before calling her back, already guessing what the conversation would be about. The moment she answered, her tone was sharp enough to cut glass. Diane, what the hell did you do to Mom? I rubbed my temple, exhausted already. Good morning to you too. Don't play dumb, she snapped. She told me everything. You humiliated her at the bank, Diane. They made her show ID like she's some kind of criminal. How could you do that to her? I took a breath, trying to stay calm. Kimberly, she is a criminal. She stole $42,000 from my account. That's not an exaggeration. She forged her way in and took my money. Kimberly scoffed. You're overreacting. Mom said she borrowed it. You know she was trying to help me. Why are you making this so ugly? Her words landed like ice. You knew? I asked slowly. I found out afterward, she stammered. But I told her she should have talked to you first. Still, she did it for a good reason. I was drowning in debt, Diane. You don't understand how bad things were for me. My heart ached, but my anger burned hotter. So you both thought it was okay to use me as your personal bank, without asking? She was trying to help her daughter, Kimberly shot back. You act like you've never needed help before. Not like that, I said firmly. Not by stealing. There's a difference between asking and taking. There was a pause on the line, followed by an indignant sigh. You've always been dramatic, she said bitterly. You could have just let this go and spared Mom the embarrassment. But no, you had to make a scene. You always have to be the martyr, don't you? I clenched my jaw, staring out the kitchen window. The late afternoon sun spilled across the counter, but I felt cold inside. Kimberly, I'm not the villain here. I'm the victim. Mom took money that didn't belong to her. The bank followed protocol, that's all. If she felt embarrassed, that's on her. Kimberly's voice softened suddenly, the way it always did when she was about to manipulate. Look, Diane. She's old. She doesn't have much time left. Can't you just let this go? Be family again? You're really going to let money come between us? That sentence, you're really going to let money come between us, hit me like a slap. As if the betrayal was my fault for noticing it, as if boundaries were a form of cruelty. I ended the call before I said something I'd regret. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and called Ruth. She was the only person I could talk to who didn't twist things around. I told her everything. About Kimberly's call, about how both of them were trying to make me feel guilty for protecting myself. Ruth listened quietly, then said, You know what this is, right? It's control. They're used to you cleaning up their messes, and now that you've drawn a line, they're panicking. I just feel so alone in this, I admitted. It's like I'm the only sane person in a family that runs on manipulation. That's because you are, Ruth said gently. And that's exactly why you need to protect yourself. Document everything, every message, every phone call, every transaction. If this ever escalates, you'll need proof. Her words gave me purpose. That night, I pulled out a manila folder and began filling it. Bank statements, screenshots, emails, notes from every conversation I could remember. It felt methodical, almost therapeutic, like I was taking back control one page at a time. But while I was quietly protecting myself, my mother was doing the opposite. Loudly. A week later, Ruth called me after attending Sunday service at the local church. Diane, she said cautiously, I think you should know. Your mother's been talking. A lot. My heart sank. What did she say? Ruth hesitated. She's been telling people that you abandoned her and froze her out of your life, that you're trying to cut her off financially, and she's afraid you'll put her out on the street. My stomach twisted in disbelief. She's the one who stole from me, and now I'm the villain? I know, honey, Ruth said softly. People love a victim, especially when it's an elderly woman with a sympathetic story. Don't let it get to you. Just stay focused. But it was impossible not to let it get to me. Over the next few days, I started getting subtle glances at the grocery store, hesitant smiles from neighbors who used to wave warmly. One woman, a longtime acquaintance from church, even said, I hope you and your mom work things out, Diane. It's not right to leave her alone like that. That's when I realized the damage my mother was doing wasn't just financial anymore. It was social, reputational, emotional. I called Sandra that evening to update her, my voice shaking with frustration. She's not just stealing money anymore, I said. She's stealing my peace. Sandra listened carefully. You've taken good steps so far, Diane, she said. But if she's this unpredictable, I recommend one more measure. Freeze the account entirely. That way, even if someone tried something, they couldn't move a dime. The idea brought me instant relief. Let's do it, I said. We went through the process that night. It felt like locking a door after a long line of intruders. For the first time in weeks, I slept soundly, but peace never lasts long in my family, because just a few days later, I got another call from the bank, and this time, it wasn't about money. It was about the law. When the phone rang that Monday morning, I recognized the number immediately. It was Sandra. I answered, expecting a quick update about my frozen account, but her voice carried a weight that made my heart sink before she even finished her first sentence. Diane, she said gently, the bank's fraud department has officially opened an investigation regarding the forged authorization on your account. For a moment, I didn't respond. Hearing the word fraud out loud made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. Up until now, I'd been angry, heartbroken, betrayed. But this was different. This was legal, official. Sandra continued, they'll be reaching out to you for documentation and a statement. I wanted to let you know personally before the notice goes out to your mother. My mother? I echoed, my stomach tightening. Yes, Sandra said carefully. She'll receive a formal letter explaining that her actions are under review and that access to your account, and potentially hers, if funds were transferred, will be restricted until the matter is resolved. I exhaled slowly, feeling a strange mix of vindication and dread. Thank you for telling me, Sandra. After hanging up, I sat in silence at my kitchen table for a long time. My coffee had gone cold, untouched. I knew this was the right step. It was what needed to happen. But the thought of my 78-year-old mother receiving a legal notice from the bank because of me made me feel sick. Later that afternoon, I got an email from the bank's fraud department. The subject line read, "Request for statement and supporting documentation." The email explained that to verify my claim, I needed to provide copies of identification, bank records, and a signed affidavit confirming that I had never authorized Elaine Brooks to be added as a cosigner on my account. I printed the forms and stared at them for a while. Signing them felt like crossing an invisible line, one I'd avoided my entire life. I'd spent decades being the daughter who kept the peace, who cleaned up other people's chaos quietly. But now, here I was, signing a legal document that named my own mother as a potential fraud suspect. I picked up the pen. My hand trembled, but I signed anyway. That same week, Elaine received her notice. I didn't hear about it from her directly, of course. Instead, I got the fallout through Kimberly. My phone buzzed one evening while I was washing dishes. I didn't want to answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Diane," Kimberly said breathlessly, "what did you do?" "Mom just got a letter from the bank saying she's under investigation. She's hysterical. How could you do this to her?" I dried my hands on a towel, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I didn't do this to her, Kimberly. She did it to herself when she forged my name and stole from me." Kimberly groaned. "You're blowing this out of proportion. She didn't mean any harm. She was trying to help me. She's your mother, for God's sake." "She's also a grown woman who knows right from wrong," I said firmly. "You both crossed a line, and there are consequences for that." There was a sharp inhale on the other end. "Diane, please, just withdraw the complaint. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You don't want this on her record." "I didn't start this," I said, my voice cracking slightly, "but I'm ending it." Kimberly's voice hardened. "You've changed. You're cruel." "No," I whispered. "I'm finally standing up for myself." She hung up without another word. A few days later, a fraud investigator named Mr. Larson contacted me to schedule an in-person interview. When he arrived at my house, he was polite, but professional, a man who'd clearly done this many times before. I offered him coffee, which he declined, and we sat at my dining table, surrounded by folders and documents I'd meticulously collected. He began by reviewing the affidavit I'd signed and the bank's original paperwork. He compared my mother's forged signature with known samples from her checking account. "The handwriting similarities are very strong," he said, adjusting his glasses, "but we'll have our forensic team verify it officially." I felt a hollow ache in my chest. "This feels surreal," I admitted. "I never thought I'd see my mother's name on a fraud report." Mr. Larson nodded sympathetically. "Family-related fraud cases are, unfortunately, more common than you might think. But you've done the right thing by coming forward early. It'll help prevent further loss." He asked a few more questions about my relationship with my mother, how often she'd had access to my personal information, and whether I'd noticed any other irregularities. I answered as best I could, feeling both exhausted and oddly lighter with each answer. When he finished taking notes, he closed his folder and said, "We'll be freezing all associated accounts temporarily while we review the signatures and authorization history. You'll still have full access to your funds, but Mrs. Brooks' linked privileges, if any remain, will be disabled until this is resolved." I nodded slowly. "Thank you. I know it sounds strange, but this feels like the first time in years that I've actually been protected. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next disaster. I was acting, not reacting." That evening, I went for a walk around my neighborhood. The air was crisp, the autumn leaves crunching beneath my I should have felt peace, but guilt tugged at me with every step. The image of my mother receiving that investigation notice kept flashing in my mind, her hands shaking, her voice trembling, her pride shattered. But then another image pushed through. Me, staring at my bank statement that morning when I first saw the missing $42,000. The panic, the betrayal, the complete disregard for everything I'd worked for. That guilt didn't erase the truth. It didn't excuse what she'd done. For once, I wasn't letting guilt guide me. I was letting justice do it instead. When I returned home, I checked my voicemail. One new message. It was from Sandra. Her voice was steady but cautious. Diane, I just wanted to update you. The bank's legal department may need to contact you soon. Mrs. Brooks has been in touch, and she's not taking this quietly. I thought the worst was over, until Mom decided to make it personal. If I thought my mother's anger had peaked with the investigation, I was wrong. It turned out she wasn't done fighting. She was just changing tactics. When manipulation and guilt stopped working, she decided to go for something she knew would cut even deeper. My reputation. It started with a Facebook post, a long, rambling one, written in her usual dramatic tone, where she painted herself as a frail, heartbroken woman victimized by her ungrateful daughter. The post began with, I never thought I'd live to see the day my own child would try to destroy me. After everything I've sacrificed, my daughter Diane froze my bank accounts, called the police, and accused me, her elderly mother, of fraud. The words felt like poison when I read them. She went on to describe me as cold, vindictive, and obsessed with money. By the end, she had turned my act of self-protection into a grotesque story of elder abuse. Kimberly shared the post within minutes, and not just shared, she added her own commentary. I'm ashamed of my sister for what she's done to our mom. No child should treat a parent this way. That was all it took. Within hours, mutual acquaintances, distant relatives, and people from my mother's church began commenting, all siding with her. So heartbreaking, Elaine. You don't deserve this. Some kids forget who raised them once they have money. Diane should be ashamed. I sat there staring at my phone, watching my world unravel one comment at a time. It felt surreal, like being accused of a crime I didn't commit, except this time the trial was public and the jury was made up of everyone I knew. By the next morning, whispers had already reached my workplace. Colleagues who'd always greeted me warmly now avoided eye contact. During lunch, I could feel the tension in the break room, quiet murmurs, half-finished conversations that stopped when I walked in. By the afternoon, my supervisor, Dr. Wallace, called me into her office. She closed the door, her tone cautious. Diane, she began, I'm not sure if you're aware, but there's been some chatter online involving your name and your mother. I felt my face flush. I know, I said softly. It's not true. None of it. She nodded sympathetically. I figured as much. You've been here 15 years. Your integrity's never been in question. But you should know. People talk. You might want to make a formal statement just to clear the air. After work, I sat in my car for nearly half an hour, gripping the steering wheel. My hands trembled. It wasn't enough that my mother had stolen from me. Now she was trying to strip me of my dignity, too. That night, I called Ruth. She could hear the tension in my voice immediately. She's saying I'm abusing her, Ruth, I said, pacing my living room. People actually believe her. I'm being called heartless and greedy. I'm the one who spent years paying her bills. Ruth's voice was firm. Listen to me, Diane. This is what abusers do when they're exposed. They play the victim. She's desperate to regain control of the story, I sighed. I just don't know how to fight back without looking like I'm attacking an old woman. You don't need to attack, Ruth said calmly. You just need the truth. She was right. The truth, documented, signed, official, was the one thing my mother couldn't twist. The next morning, I called Sandra at the bank. She listened quietly as I explained the situation. I understand, she said, and I can help. I'll draft a formal letter from the bank confirming the investigation results, something that clearly states you were the victim of unauthorized access. I could have cried from relief. Thank you, Sandra. That means more than you know. By the next day, I had the letter in my inbox, professional, concise, and indisputable. It confirmed that the bank had verified the forged authorization and that I had been cleared of any wrongdoing. It even referenced the fraudulent withdrawal in neutral, legal terms. That evening, with my heart pounding, I made my own post. I never wanted to bring private family matters into the public, but since false information has been shared about me, I need to clarify a few things. The situation involving my mother is a verified case of unauthorized access to my personal bank account. I've attached an official statement from the bank confirming this. I wish things hadn't come to this, but I won't be silent while lies are spread about me. I attached Sandra's letter and pressed post. At first, silence. Then slowly, the tide began to turn. Comments started appearing, cautious at first, then supportive. Wow, Diane, I had no idea. So sorry you're going through this. Thank you for sharing your side. Families can be complicated. Stay strong. By morning, dozens of people had liked or shared my post. Even a few from my mother's church offered quiet apologies and private messages. I wasn't doing it for sympathy. I just wanted my name back. My peace. Later that day, I noticed that my mother's original post had vanished, deleted, but there was no apology, no acknowledgement, nothing. Kimberly stopped posting entirely, though I caught her liking a few vague, family loyalty quotes. The damage couldn't be fully undone, but at least the truth was out there. For the first time in weeks, I felt vindicated, not victorious, but steady. Still, as I sat at my kitchen table that night, sipping tea, I realized vindication didn't feel as sweet as I'd hoped. It was heavy, sad. Because what did it matter if the world finally saw the truth, when the people who mattered most refused to see it? I looked out the window at the quiet street beyond my porch. The storm had passed. At least I thought it had. But closure doesn't come easy, especially when the police get involved. 2 months after the investigation began, I received the call that would finally bring the nightmare to a close. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed. It was Sandra. Her voice was calm but carried a faint tone of satisfaction. The sound of something finally resolved. "Diane," she said, "the bank has completed its investigation. The findings are official. The authorization on your account was forged, and the withdrawal of $42,000 has been deemed unauthorized." I sank into the nearest chair, a wave of relief washing over me. "So, what happens now?" "Well," she continued, "the legal department has issued a repayment order to your mother. She'll be required to return the full amount or face legal consequences, including a possible civil claim." I exhaled, the air trembling as it left my lungs. After months of turmoil, I finally had validation, not just emotionally, but on paper. The proof was irrefutable. My mother had stolen from me, and now the institution she thought she could manipulate had turned against her. "Will she go to jail?" I asked softly. The question hung there, heavier than I intended. "That's up to you," Sandra said gently. "You have the right to press criminal charges, but if you'd rather not, we can settle this through a legal repayment agreement instead." I stared at the window for a long moment, watching the wind stir the autumn leaves outside. The idea of my mother in handcuffs, even after everything she'd done, twisted my stomach. I couldn't bring myself to do it. "No," I finally said. "I don't want her to go to jail. I just want my money back and my peace." Sandra nodded. "Then we'll proceed with civil resolution. Our lawyers will contact hers and draft a repayment plan." That night, I sat on my couch, staring at the bank's email detailing the outcome. It was surreal. For months, I'd been living in a fog of disbelief, humiliation, and heartbreak. And now, finally, justice was in writing. A week later, I got a message from an unfamiliar number, an attorney representing my mother. The tone of the email was clipped and formal, stating that Elaine Brooks had agreed to a legal repayment agreement. She would repay the $42,000 in structured installments over 2 years, and in exchange, I would agree not to pursue criminal action. The irony wasn't lost on me. My mother, who'd accused me of destroying her life, was now forced to face the consequences she had brought on herself. When the documents arrived, I took them to my own lawyer, signed my portion, and watched as Elaine's signature, the same handwriting that had once forged its way into my savings, appeared again, this time beneath the words repayment agreement. For once, her signature meant accountability, not deceit. After that, things grew eerily quiet. Kimberly stopped speaking to me completely. She unfriended me on social media, blocked my number, and made no effort to bridge the divide. Part of me wanted to reach out, to at least salvage something from the wreckage, but I knew it was useless. She'd chosen her side. Ruth, though, never wavered. She was there through every step, every email, every document, every sleepless night. One evening, we sat on her porch after dinner, watching the sun dip below the trees. "You did it," she said softly. "You really stood up to them." "I don't feel victorious," I admitted. "I just feel free. Like I've been holding my breath for years, and now I can finally exhale." Ruth smiled knowingly. "That's what boundaries do, honey. They don't punish people. They protect you. Those words stayed with me. Over the next few weeks, I started thinking seriously about what to do with my future. I'd spent my whole life tied to other people's chaos. First my family, then my ex-husband, and now my mother. I wanted something that was purely mine. With part of the repaid funds and some savings, I began looking for a little piece of land on the outskirts of town, somewhere quiet, surrounded by trees, where I could eventually build a small retirement cottage. Nothing extravagant, just peace and space that belonged solely to me. When I told Sandra about it during a follow-up meeting at the bank, she smiled. "You deserve it, Diane. You've handled this with grace and strength most people wouldn't have." I laughed softly. Grace wasn't always my first reaction. "Maybe not," she said. "But in the end, you proved that standing up for yourself doesn't have to mean losing your kindness." I walked out of that meeting feeling lighter than I had in years. The ache in my chest that had followed me since the day I saw that missing balance on my bank app was finally gone. In its place was something new, quiet pride. I used to think my worth was measured by how much I gave, how much I forgave, how much I tolerated. But now I understood. My worth was mine to protect. I had my money back. I had my dignity back. And piece by piece, I was rebuilding my peace. But as I stood in my backyard one evening, watching the sky turn soft shades of lavender, a thought surfaced that I couldn't ignore. I'd gotten justice. I'd gotten closure on paper. But emotionally, there was still a part of me that needed to face her one last time. Not to fight, not for revenge, but for closure. Before I left town, I decided to pay Mom one last visit. Not for revenge, but for closure. I told myself I wasn't going to see her again. After the investigation, the public humiliation, and the repayment agreement, I had sworn I was done. I didn't owe my mother anything. Not an explanation, not a conversation, not another piece of peace. But a few months later, as autumn gave way to winter, something inside me shifted. Maybe it was the way the air felt cleaner, or maybe it was the quiet of my new cottage. The silence that had once comforted me now felt unfinished, like a sentence without a period. I realized I needed closure, not for her, but for me. So one Saturday morning, I got in my car and drove the 40 minutes to my mother's house. I didn't call ahead. I didn't want her to have time to prepare her performance. I wanted to see her exactly as she was, stripped of the stories she spun, just Elaine Brooks, not the martyr she made herself out to be. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed how much smaller everything looked. The paint on the porch was peeling. The flowers she used to obsessively prune were gone, replaced by weeds. It felt like a metaphor for everything she'd let rot over the years. She opened the door before I even knocked. For a brief second, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked frail, thinner, older, but her eyes still carried that same sharp pride I remembered. "Well," she said flatly, "look who decided to visit." "Hi, Mom," I said softly. She crossed her arms. "You've certainly taken your time. I suppose you're here to see if I've survived your little witch hunt." I took a slow breath, reminding myself why I came. "I'm not here to fight. I just wanted to talk." Her lips curled in that familiar, dismissive smirk. "Talk? After you dragged my name through the mud? After you made everyone think I'm a thief?" "You are a thief," I said gently, not to provoke, but because lies were the poison that had kept us both sick for too long. "You stole my money, Mom. You forged my signature, and you humiliated me when I tried to protect myself." She turned away, her voice rising. "I was helping your sister. You've always been selfish, Diane. Always." I stood there, feeling the same ache I'd felt as a child. That desperate, impossible need to make her see me, to make her understand. But this time, I knew better. "Helping someone doesn't mean hurting someone else," I said quietly. "And loving you doesn't mean letting you keep taking from me." She let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, listen to you now. So self-righteous. You think you're better than everyone. Always have." I shook my head. "No, Mom. I just finally stopped letting you make me feel small." Her expression hardened. "You ruined this family." For a moment, I almost broke. Her voice, that cold, familiar authority, still carried the power to wound me. But then I remembered Ruth's words. Boundaries don't punish people. They protect you. I looked at her, the woman who'd raised me, who'd taught me to survive, but never to trust. I didn't ruin this family, I said steadily. You did, when you chose lies over love. She stared at me for a long time, then turned away, her tone softening only slightly. You'll regret this one day. When I'm gone, you'll wish you'd been kinder. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I already wish things had been different. But kindness isn't letting people walk over you. I forgive you, Mom, but I'll never trust you again. Her shoulders stiffened, but she didn't respond. She just stood there, staring out the window, refusing to face me. That silence, the one that used to make me beg for affection, now felt freeing. I realized then that forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It didn't mean pretending the damage never happened. It meant releasing the weight of it so I could finally move forward. I took one last look around the house, the same house where I'd spent years trying to be the good daughter. And then I said quietly, "Goodbye, Mom." She didn't turn around. She didn't stop me. And somehow, that was the clearest answer she could have given. When I stepped outside, the cold air hit my face like a baptism. It didn't sting, it cleansed. I got in my car, closed the door, and drove away without looking back. Months later, I was sitting on the porch of my little cottage, the one I bought with the money I'd fought to reclaim. The air smelled like pine and rain. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else's approval. I wasn't walking on eggshells or cleaning up anyone's mess. I was simply living. Sometimes I'd think about my mother, not with hate, but with a kind of sad acceptance. I knew she'd never apologize, never see what she did as wrong, but that was no longer my burden to carry. I had spent decades being defined by what other people took from me, my energy, my peace, my trust. But now I was defined by what I'd finally reclaimed, myself. Looking out over the quiet stretch of woods behind my home, I whispered the truth I'd learned the hard way. Sometimes protecting yourself isn't cruel. It's survival. And if anyone ever tells you that family comes first, remember, integrity should come before everything else. In the end, I didn't just win back my money, I won back my peace. I learned that sometimes justice doesn't come through anger, but through quiet strength and boundaries that can't be crossed again. My mother's choices broke something that can never be repaired, but they also freed me to live on my own terms. Protecting myself wasn't selfish, it was survival. And tell me honestly, if the person who betrayed you was your own mother, would you still forgive her? If this story made you feel something, that chill, that anger, or that quiet satisfaction when justice finally came, then you already know why stories like this matter. There are so many more untold truths about family, betrayal, and strength that I want to share with you. Stay with me for the next one. You never know whose story might feel a little too familiar.